latest episode of the PCT podcast. We're absolutely delighted to welcome a highly experienced and very knowledgeable coach to you in the form of Harry Watling. Good morning, Harry. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Martin. Thank you for having me on and inviting me on.
Thank you very much. As we say, thank you for taking the time to speak to us. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your current role at the minute?
Yeah, I'm 32 years old, and I'm the current first team coach at Queen's Park Rangers in the Championship.
And the reason this chat's come about is that you've got the international break, which has allowed a little bit of a break for yourself in your busy schedule. Can you tell us how you're feeling now you've had a little bit of time off the grass? Yeah,
it's a unique situation. We was just talking beforehand, wasn't we, about sort of how relentless the Championship is Tuesday, Saturday. And I think this unique scenario where we've got a nice break with the manager's given us 10 days off. So I've put the ball down for the last few days. I'll probably pick it up again at the weekend and just go through some video and get ready for when we're back in next week.
That sort of leads me on to what I was going to ask next, is how are you looking to fill your time over the next sort of 10 days?
Yeah, do you know what? It's been plenty of rest. Obviously, naturally, you reflect a lot. You reflect on the things that were controllable, the things that, maybe the uncontrollables as well. You reflect on those a lot. Lots of what ifs. Lots of really, really good highs so far in the first part of the season. Obviously, we're all on a new journey together. So, and that's, the manager included. It's his first gig as a gaffer. So we're all learning together. But it's been really good. We're on course for where we wanted to be in terms of our points total. So we're happy with that. And I think when you reflect on it all, the fire starts to burn again, doesn't it? And you're ready to go back in again.
It's when you're doing it, you feel drained. But once you have a breakaway from it, you want back in. Just before we sort of get into the crux of your coaching journey so far, I just wanted to touch on, obviously, how have you found it? Obviously, as you mentioned there, it's Michael's first gig as a first team gaffer. How do you sort of evaluate or predict your season going into a club that you're fairly new at?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think you have to be realistic. I think you have to look at the league. You have to look at how many, really, really big teams are in the league. Teams that have come down from the Premier League immediately, and teams that have come down recently that are really having a push to go up in terms of their squad depth. And I think we have to bring our own bespoke, unique style to the league, which I like to think that we have done. And I think we've got a brilliant forward-thinking manager. I think we've got complete reflection of that in terms of our squad and in terms of the style that we try and bring to the games. And I think it's just about trying to stay on course with that as much as possible, even over, through the highs and the bumps. You have to really try and, stay true to what you want to be and what you want to bring to the league and the game in general. And I feel like we've done that so far. And that's how we measure it, really.
Just as we're talking now, I'm just putting a question in for later on, because I do want to get into the crux of your coaching. What age was it that you first decided, Harry, that you were wanting to be a coach, and that was something that you really wanted to dive into?
It was very early, sort of 14, 15, 16. It was something where I just felt I had a higher ceiling than playing. And then I was encouraged to go and start taking my badges, level 1, level 2, B licence, etc. And it was just, I just think it was born out of watching really good people, watching them deliver, watching them practice, and wanting to replicate that and seeing what effect they had on the young players they were working with, really.
Can you remember your first session and how it went?
Yeah, do you know what? It was one I remember I planned it for 2 or 3 days and ripped it up and threw it in the bin and come back to it again. It actually went really well, and it was probably something that fed my enthusiasm to keep going with it. It was with a group of, I think it was under 12, under 13 girls that were affiliated to Crystal Palace at the time. And it was my mate's mum. She said, would you come in and do a session with them? And they loved it. And it was, I reckon if it was filmed and I watched it back now, it was probably terrible. But at the time, the girls that were participating really enjoyed it. It was a good flow to the session. The energy was high. And it was it was just around that, really. I just remember planning it and writing it all down and just doing some research and looking for practices online. And then, yeah, just turned up, it was raining. And yeah, no, it went really well, to be fair.
So you mentioned then, obviously, with the session going well, it sort of fueled you more to do it. And you went on to achieve the UEFA B license at the age of 18. That must have felt like a pretty good achievement at that tender age in the world of coaching.
Do you know what? At the time, I didn't realise that. It was just a natural progression. And when I look back now, and I see, obviously, I got it. You know, I got the B license at that age. It is a really big achievement. But when you're doing it and you're in that process and you're sort of relentless, and that's a word I use all the time. I am relentless. Once I get the bit between my teeth, I just keep going. And it was like, okay, what's next? But when I look back on it, and I look back on the course and the people that I went on the course with and the process, and the gap in age between me and the next youngest person on the course, you're probably talking 20 years. But it was good. And I needed that to go to the next level of where I wanted to get to. I knew I needed a B license to work in academy football. So I knew that was something I had to attain. And I remember my final assessment, developing wide play, working with the fullbacks and the wide players, and it didn't last very long. It was 9 or 10 minutes, and Alan Walker just walked over and just said, "H, that'll do. That's more than enough. That's it. Come off," and he just passed me. So again, it's something now when I reflect on it, you're not surprised at the time because you believe in yourself. And that's not saying that in an arrogant way at all. It's just because you're so engrossed in the process of getting to the top of that particular mountain, if you like. It's only when you look back. I look back now, so that was, it was a long time ago. It's 14 years ago now. So I look back, and it's just something I'm really proud of.
And rightly so. I look at it now, and you see that obviously the B license is the standard to get into academy football. At the age of 18, most are still playing and going to college and uni. So, and I really want to hone in on that word relentless that you used in the modern game now. Do you feel that being relentless is something you have to be? Whereas in the past it might have been seen as busy, do you think now you just have to be absolutely relentless and ruthless within your work?
Yeah, I think you've got to have a real good honesty about what you're doing. I think your intentions have got to be right. I think when people, like, you use the word busy there, I think when people throw that word around, it's thrown around sometimes on the occasion that they're not actually working as hard as what someone else is. Yeah. And that's why they throw it out there in the first place. That's what I am. That's what I'm about. I am just relentless. I just don't stop. When I did that B license, I did it with a group of players that were the same age as me. So I remember when I walked onto the pitch, I knew I didn't have the respect of any of those players because I've never met them before, I'd never seen them before. And I knew they looked at my appearance and thought, but then when they hear your voice and you start to command that respect with your presence and whatnot and your details on point, I think straight away you start winning people over. But now being relentless, I think is a really good quality to have if you want to get to the destination that you've kind of set yourself out to get to.
I'm going slightly off track here, but I think that's a really important point. You said you did your assessment with lads who are your age, and the perception straight away is, look at this young kid, but as soon as you are relentless and believe in yourself and your ability shines through, age is nothing but a number, is it not?
Yeah, I think it was interesting because I have reflected on it since that there was just like that moment for the other 22 people on the pitch at the time. When I started to set the scene to the players, I just felt it turn straight away. I set the scene in terms of what the topic was, what I was looking for. We made the agreement that it was going to be a little bit stop-start because I had to get my points out. But straight away I got the buy-in because I felt like that they kind of knew what was coming. They knew it was going to be something worthwhile listening to for that sort of 20, 30 minute block. And like I say, it went well, and it was a short one, but I think those assessments at that time were obviously different to what they are now. As I understand now, a lot of the courses are, they come and visit you over a few different occasions. It's not so much like a driving test like it was then, wasn't it? Back then it was, you had to tick these particular boxes. But no, again, like I say, it's something I look back on fondly now.
You mentioned obviously the requirement for academy football and where you wanted to go was the B license, and you got your first role with Chelsea. How did that come about? Was that through application process or volunteering?
No, that was through the manager now. So Mickey was working at the club. And he was the one that threw the gauntlet down to me in the first place and said, you won't be able to work in an academy unless you've got, first of all, he said level 2, and then he said B license. He moved the goalpost. So I got that. Started off in a development centre on a Monday night. Chelsea had these satellite development centres programs, which were really effective in terms of getting the younger players in and identifying the talent. And then that just grew, really. You start off on a Monday night working with the under 6s, the under 7s. First of all, just doing the ball mastery, setting the scene. Then you're given a little bit more responsibility. Then you're given that particular group to work with. Then you take the group to festivals, to Cobham. So you go to the main academy where they'll invite all of the best players from the centres together. So you go there. Obviously, I think Neil Bath walked past when I was delivering at a certain point, and then I was invited in to work with the elite group, which was all of the best players from the centres twice a week. And it just constantly developed. And Chelsea was a great experience.
Were you playing at the time of the early years of your coaching? And if so, how did this shape the way that you wanted to coach through your playing experiences?
Yeah, I was. I weren't playing at a particularly good standard, to be honest. And I just knew my ceiling was if I was sort of playing at a combined counties level, I knew that my ceiling in coaching was going to be higher than when it was playing. And being completely honest with you, financially as well, if you're going to get paid 45, 50, 60 pounds for a game playing, and you're there from 1 o'clock meet, 1:30 meet, 3 o'clock kickoff, you're not out of there till 5 o'clock, or you can go and do 4 or 5 sessions for the same amount for an hour. You have to make that decision financially. You have to make that decision. And that was something that I had to make quite early. And I just knew that I thought the coaching, if I follow this, I can go a lot further.
Through your experience at the satellite centres and development centres with Chelsea, is that where HW's school skills was born and ran alongside it? Yeah.
Do you know what I was really obsessed with doing was creating an environment for myself where I could get good quality coaching hours in. And an opportunity came up to work in a primary school delivering after school clubs, lunch clubs. That then grew into delivering PE lessons to children with learning difficulties. That then grew into delivering PE lessons for the entire school, and then another school after that. And again, just my obsession with getting better. I just knew that if I could create an environment where I could control between 25 and 35, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, deliver a session, create an environment where they're learning, create an environment where there's a buzz. I knew when I went into the professional environment at Chelsea, where I only had 10, 11, 12 players, that wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't be a problem. And I tried to create that weekly timetable for myself where I was getting those quality hours in as early as I could. So I was getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours a season working in those environments that was preparing me to go in at 5 o'clock that evening at Cobham to go and deliver to the under 9s or the under 10s or whatever it was.
It's quite interesting for me because I came through a similar pathway through sort of soccer schools and developing in the grassroots game. There's, just my opinion, there's a perception that to be a good coach, you have to be at a club, I don't know, like these sort of your professional clubs. But how vital are those experiences at the grassroots age? As you mentioned, dealing with 35, 36 kids on your own, how does that prepare you for the higher level of coaching?
Yeah, massive, pivotal, massive. We'll delve into it later on in the podcast. I might throw a few names at you, players that I've worked with that are playing for our country now. And that sounds great, doesn't it? But I would not be the coach I am today without working in those primary schools with those classes and understanding how different children learn in different ways. how to tailor that into different coaching styles and methods. It's massive. I don't think you can just turn up and coach at a club without putting those hours in, unless you're extremely talented. And no, I'm not. I just work extremely hard. So for me, it was massive.
I think that fits in with the modern day game as well. You mentioned they're dealing with how different kids learn. Do players learn differently now, even at the top level? And how you speak to them, how you tailor your responses, and I think that's, as you mentioned, that absolutely vital for you to gain that experience.
Yeah, 100%. It doesn't change. You talk about human beings at the end of the day. So just because they've got a contract to train every day, at a nice facility, and they might get picked by the manager, you have to make sure that you're nailing everything that you say has to land. So that's really important when you deliver a meeting. So if I'm delivering a meeting to our group at the moment, you're probably talking between 20 and 30 bodies in the room, and I'm trying to get a particular message across about the opposition or us. That has to land, and it can only land if I'm ticking certain boxes, and I have to know what boxes I'm trying to tick by understanding the individuals in the room. And it all boils back down to that. And again, rewinding to what we've just said, I've only learned that through working with younger people in schools, in the education environment.
And again, I think for those listening, that is absolutely vital. Gaining that experience before, and you say walk before you can run, but definitely go and get those experiences. You had 5 years at Chelsea, and then a role came up with Millwall. How would you reflect back on your time at Chelsea, and how did things maybe differ at Millwall?
I think at Chelsea, I was exposed to the top level in terms of academy players. And I can only say that now in hindsight, because I look at where they've gone, and sort of, you players like Jamal Musiala now starts every week for Bayern Munich, was in my under-9s group. And you look at these players and you remember how good they were when they came in as that raw material, if you like. The biggest thing, I'll say this a lot, biggest thing for me at Chelsea is how much the players pushed one another. It was like an infectious, healthy jealousy of one another. So it was Jamal, as an example, would finish training and watch Callum Hudson-Odoi at the end of his session and want to be as good as him. Callum would be watching Mason Mount and want to be as good as him. Mason Mount would be watching Charlie Colkett or Loftus-Cheek and want to be as good as him. Loftus-Cheek would be looking at McEachran. So it was an infectious drive, again, using the word relentless. The players there, they just sharpened each other every day. The elite sparring that was going on was top level. And then you go to Millwall, that's where I learned to coach. Again, it was like another level for me in terms of, okay, this is what you've got in terms of recruitment. You're not recruiting the same player as you are at Chelsea because you just can't get them. One or two will slip through the net. But now you've got to have a better understanding of what each player needs in particular age groups. I was very, very extreme at Millwall with my methods on how I tried to help players develop. It wasn't about the team for me at all. It was about just looking at individuals and just trying to get the best one or two up to the next level. And it wasn't about, so at Millwall, I did 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s. But it was never about producing for the first team at under 12, under 13 level. It was just getting them ready and getting them into the next phase. So going from the youth development phase to the professional development phase as a top player for that phase. That's what it was about. So I wasn't drowning them in information they didn't need yet. Worked with some really good people at Millwall, and we was just obsessed with the next one. And I think probably the analogy I would use for you and the listeners to really gauge it is a fence or a wall. Now, when you're working at Chelsea, the fence or the wall is high, and you can't see over what's at the other side all the time. So you need a manager to be willing to help them over. At Millwall, the level of the first team wasn't as high. So the players, they can see over the fence, they can see over the wall, they can see what they need to get to that level. And that's why I feel like we did produce a lot of good players at Millwall for the first team and for other people's first teams as well, which again, when you look back on it, you know, you're really proud of.
When you mentioned Harry, you were quite extreme sort of in the way that you delivered and got these. How was that seen by the staff at the club? And how did that affect any sort of relationships? If you were going in and probably, I'm not saying you did, but maybe go against the grain a little bit to help these players. How was that seen within the club?
No, it was good. I have to say there was a big buy-in. There was a big buy-in at Millwall. There was, I want to word it correctly, there was a good following. There was a good following. Obviously, I'd come from working at Chelsea at, you know, at a good level, seeing what I'd seen, being exposed to what I'd seen. And I just went into Millwall with the attitude of, come on then, we can compete here. We can do this because we're in a brilliant area in the country, great part of London. We've got great players coming through, good raw materials, and it's going to be easier for us to get them there. That was the big thing for me. Like, we can get them there. We, you know, if we can make sure that we really focus on the individual. And that's what I was about at Millwall. I was just looking at the top 4 or 5 in the group and just putting them against each other in every practice. So our best dribbler would be against our best 1v1 defender in every practice. And it was just, again, they were sparring with each other a lot. But the buy-in was good. You know, the staff there, they see it, they understood it. I remember I took over, first group I took over was the under-12s. A young boy in there, Sam Adozie, who's now playing at Southampton's first team. We managed to sell him to Man City. I remember seeing the group for the first time, and the head of the phase, Anthony Gow, really, really good coach, just said to me, "There's 1 or 2 in there, H, that we can, you know, you can push and develop." I remember seeing Sam and just going, "He's as good as I've seen. He's as good as I've seen." And I was excited by that. And then I was quite infectious to the staff, saying, "Hey, come on, we've got some top players in this building. We need to concentrate on them and have a little bit more confidence and belief in our program that we can attract better players here, and push them up in the age groups and get them into the first team on the pitch."
Whilst at Millwall, you've got HW Soccer Schools. You're also the CEO at Advanced Player Development. Can you tell us a little bit there? You mentioned you're relentless. How did you manage those different roles in your time as a coach then? Because I'm assuming that all those roles took a lot of your time.
Yeah, so I was unsure whether I wanted to be an academy director, a first team coach, a youth team coach, but I knew I wanted to go to one of those 3 points. So for me, I was approached by a college who just said, "Would you come in and potentially run our under 18s program?" So for me, it was practice on being a youth team coach, same age group. First of all, they showed me their program of what they had, and we decided to rip that up. And I wanted the players to train 4 mornings a week, plus a gym session, plus an analysis session. All the games would be filmed. So we run it like a youth team. And again, it was about creating the best environment for those players to get to whatever levels they would get to, whether or not it was they wasn't involved in a team or they was involved in a team. And there was 1 or 2 that we managed to move on to pro clubs. But also, being really honest, from a selfish perspective, it was about getting that experience myself and working with that age group and what that would look like on a day-to-day basis when I did eventually move into full-time football.
How would you encourage or add advice to coaches now who are probably on that pathway and maybe overloading the schedules to try and get that break?
Yeah, keep going. I think with our game, I think we're slightly undervalued in terms of what we're paid across the board. That's across the board, unless you're working, unless you're lucky enough to work at a level where, first team football, where that changes. And I think what we're forced to do as coaches is we're forced to try and get as many hours in as possible. But I would flip that on its head and see that as a major positive. So if your timetable in your week consists of working with under 18 players, whether that be youth team level, college level, whatever it is, if your timetable consists of a few one-to-one sessions where you are concentrating on the individual, breaking down their technique, talking to them about the geography of the pitch, tactically on where they play, if your timetable consists of potentially working in a primary school or a secondary school where you've got to balance players with learning difficulties, players there, children there who are talented, children there who are not interested, and you've got to balance all that in one group. I would look at that as a positive and say, you're getting so much more than what someone else who is just working in one particular environment is. And I would say, just keep working through it, be relentless, and keep working through it. And I think your work ethic and your quality will get you to the level that you want to get to eventually.
Just before I move on to the opportunity at West Ham, how would you describe any knockbacks you had? So applications that you've gone for, how would you describe that?
I think initially they're disappointing. I remember I applied for my A license when I was 22, and I just got point blank told I was too young, which for me again was an interesting answer, but it showed me that there was still a closed mindset amongst the people that make those decisions. I've sat down and spoke to people before about jobs, and I feel like, I've always been true to myself. I think when you do get knocked back in football, I just think it should re-energise you. I don't think it should knock you down. I think it should re-energise you. If you know what you're doing and you believe in your work, I think it's an important thing to, just like I said about what we're doing at the minute at QPR under the manager, just staying true to what you believe in, because someone will take a chance on you. Someone will, and when they don't, it might not be the right one for you.
You had 4 years with Millwall, and as it sounds, a really exponential learning experience. A move over to West Ham, how did that come about? Was it just time for a change of scenery, or more responsibility?
No, I went on my, I think it was my advanced youth with a guy that worked at West Ham, and Terry Wesley come and spoke on the course, who was the academy manager at the time, and I loved it. I really struggle in the classroom environment, funnily enough. I can't sit still, I can't concentrate. I just love being out on the pitch. But he had me for an hour and a half. And I loved it. He was talking about players and their development pathways and their individual development plans. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I'd like to work with him. I'd really like to work with him. And an opportunity came up just to meet him and go across. I remember I went there and presented and spoke with him, and he just said, look, he said, Harry, I'd love to offer you a role here, but we've only got the 14s and 15s available. I think you could come and be my youth team coach tomorrow. So I just explained to him where I was in terms of my viewpoint on that, and I just said, look, I want to come and work here. The age at the moment is not the be all and end all for me. I want to come and work here, test myself again at a Cat 1 club. West Ham as an academy has got a fantastic history. So went in, done the 14s, 15s, and then after 6-7 weeks, Terry pulled me back in his office and said, look, I want to pair you up with Liam Manning, going in with the 21s twice a week, just going in and helping with that and exposing yourself to that a little bit, because long term, we see you moving into one of these roles. So the time at West Ham, I have to say, I absolutely loved it. And the people there, the coaches there, there's a lot of West Ham people working at West Ham, and they get it. So in every age group, there's someone there, whether it's Colton Cole, Paul Konchesky, Kev Keane, Zav Hines, Stevie Potts. There's someone there in each age group that gets the club, that's either played for the club or coached the club. But I loved my time at West Ham. It was brilliant.
In January 2021, you took the role of manager at Hartford Athletic in the States. Obviously, in and around London, how did that opportunity come about, and what was going through your mind as you decided to take that role?
Yeah, I obviously I was still at West Ham at the time, and a guy called Paul Buckle got in touch. Paul's obviously been a manager over in the UK, Torquay, Luton, Bristol Rovers, etc. Managed in playoff finals at Wembley. Really successful guy, great guy. He bought a book that was written by a good friend of mine, Stevie Salis, and inside the book it says something about me at the bottom. And he was looking for a new head coach at Hartford Athletic. I was at a point, Martin, being honest with you, where I was at West Ham, I was really enjoying my work, and I was 30 at the time, And I was thinking, it's going to take me another 7, 8, 9 years to get a go over here as a manager at a good level. Hartford playing the USL, which is one league below the MLS. So it's a good standard. Done my research on the club. Really, relatively new club. Quite a small club in terms of some of the big hitters in the division, which I actually quite liked because, again, I have got a little bit of a healthy chip on my shoulder in terms of just being an underdog in general. So I like that. That really appealed to me. Paul rang me, presented the opportunity, said that there would be a process, and would I like to be a part of the process? Next thing I know, he's rung up Colton Cole. He's rung up a couple of people that I know and done his own work, and they've sort of said, H, Bucks has been in touch. I then spoke to the owner. I then presented to a select group on how I wanted to play. And when I say how I wanted to play, it's how I wanted to attack the other team's goal and how I wanted to defend our goal. How we got to the edge of the box, which is outside of scoring, the hardest thing to do in football is get to the edge of the other team's 18-yard box. How I wanted to help build the club, how I wanted to help potentially build the academy. And I was offered the job, and it was a no-brainer, but it was a big step because I wasn't able to go over there and select any staff. It was something that they were strong on, and Paul believed in. Paul said, "Look, I want you to come over here on your own and work with the staff that we've got in place here," which again I was up for. Because it was new and it was stepping into the unknown, which appealed to me. But like I say, took the opportunity and I'm really thankful for that time there and loved it, absolutely loved it.
Your first match was on the 30th of April against New York Red Bulls second team, and just before I go on to obviously the first game, what was the build-up like? Obviously you went over in January. It's a few months to get your teeth into it. How did you set up the team? How did you initially speak to the players? And then we'll talk about the first game.
Well, anyone that knows the East Coast and knows sort of the area of New England will know that December, January, February, March, it is freezing. So when I went over there, and our pre-season was disrupted a little bit by the weather. But also, you got to think we were sort of coming out of the back end of COVID as well. So I remember my first day at work, and I prepared a presentation to sort of flick through with the players, and I ended up binning it off last minute. And I just stood in front of them, and I just said, I was really upfront and honest with them. I just said, look, I know you've probably looked into my background, so I don't need to stand up here and go through slides on who I am or who I've worked for and who I've worked with. I just wanted to, I just said to him, I'm an honest man, really honest man. When I pick you, I'm going to pick you because you've picked yourself in training. And when I don't pick you, I will have you in my office and I will tell you why, and I'll tell you how to get into my team. And that's the honesty that I will have throughout this process. And I need everyone in the room to get on the bus with me, get on the journey with me, and we'll go as far as we can. We'll go as far as we possibly can. We'll never leave the pitch. We'll never, ever leave the pitch sort of leaving anything in the air. We'll always leave it all out there. And I just kept it really simple. And then pre-season, our first game, we played NYCFC, who ended up winning the MLS that year. And we got beat 2-0, but we were excellent. We were excellent. I remember the first 20 minutes, it was like we was thrown together, and it was like the Alamo, and we were defending our goal, and they went 2-0 up really quickly. We got in at half time, took a deep breath, changed a couple of things. We had a right go in the second half. And I went into Ronnie Darla's office afterwards, who was the manager, and he just said, you got a good team there. And that gave us a little bit of belief. We had 5 more games that pre-season, finished the pre-season unbeaten after that initial game. And went into our first game with our towels up, to be honest. We had a belief. We had a really young group outside of the captain, who was the same age as myself. Everyone was 23 or below. That's how we recruited. And there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes before the first game in terms of registration of players. So we was on the bus, traveling down to New Jersey. And I was informed that 3 of the lads who were on the bus registered were not registered. the club hadn't registered in time, and they were 3 starters. So I had to deal with that. I had to calm the owner down. The owner was on the phone trying to see if I was okay. And I just said, listen, we're fine. We're all right. I'll tweak it where I need to tweak it. I spoke to those players individually. They were brilliant. They took it on the chin. I just said to them, look, I need you in a different capacity for this game. What's happened. I need you in a different capacity. I need you to help us win off the pitch and support the players and elevate them. We get to the game. We get to the warm-up. I've then been told that another 2 of the players haven't been registered. So we've sort of had to stitch it together last minute. The game was a really good game. I had to play one of my midfielders at centre half. I was going to have to bring my second goalkeeper on up front towards the end because we didn't have anyone else and the centre forward cramped up. But we managed to win the game. Like you say, 3-2. And again, it was a really good sign of how together the group were, because it wasn't about the first 11 going out and carrying out the game plan. It was about what we'd spoken about for those 7-8 weeks prior as a whole team. And I think that's the big thing. In the first 15 games of that season, we were a team. We wasn't a group. And there's a difference. A group of people will maybe sit on a plane together, but a team are aligned and together. And that's what we were. And that game gave us a lot of belief, because there was a lot of things thrown at us before the game, and we managed to come through it and start the season off with a win.
It sort of leads me on to when you go into a new club as a manager, and obviously a new country. What are the first things that you put in place, and what did you go about doing? And obviously then, how do you deal with the bumps in the road that are thrown at you last minute?
Well, I think initially the recruitment side was an eye-opener for me, because obviously I'm going into a league that's unknown to me in comparison to a lot of the other head coaches there. So the recruitment was important, but the recruitment was all done through Y-Scout, because again, we wasn't getting the players that everyone else had first dibs on. So we had to be clever about how we recruited players. And I had a guy that worked at the club at the time who was very, very good in terms of his recruitment. And again, Paul Buckle, who was, to be honest with you, was a mentor while I was over there. He was very good as well. He was very good. He was really, really good in terms of encouraging me to back myself and back my eyes when I was looking at players. I think the next thing, like I said to you before, was making sure that everybody had clarity on how we get to the other team's goal and how we stop the other team from getting to our halfway line and then our goal, and just having clarity. And that's such an important thing in football. I think when you're in the tunnel and you're about to enter the pitch, if you're 11 that are walking out there have got 100% clarity, I think you've got a really good chance of winning the game. And then cohesion. So creating that cohesion within the group, that everybody knew that the other person was batting for them, and they knew they was going to do their job and half of the other person's job if they needed them. So it was putting that in place. And once we got those wheels in motion, it was about looking at the academy and how we could potentially build the academy there. There was one youth team, under 14s team in the academy. It was about how we could build that and create, more age groups. But it was a lot of moving parts, but I loved it. I loved it because, again, I was busy every day, and I was able to go in the office and work till I wanted to finish. It wasn't like, the lights are going out now, H, you've got to leave. It was, no, I decide when I'm going home. So the processes were excellent. And again, I think those processes on clarity and cohesion really stood us in good stead for those first few games of the season.
You also recorded the club's record win margin against the team that you played first, against New York Red Bulls. Proud moment to go down in history with a 7-0 win.
Yeah, it's a beautiful memory. And it's one I'm really proud of that I've been able to give those fans. The fans at Hertford, I have to say, are outstanding. They're outstanding, and they wouldn't look out of place over in England. They were brilliant. Again, there's a little bit behind the story of that. So we had a small break. We were supposed to play Real Monarchs, which is Real Salt Lake's B team, the week before, and they pulled out due to COVID. And we was on a really good run. I think we won our first We won our first 3, drew the 4th one, and we was on a good run. And they pulled out, so we had like a week where we didn't have a game. I just sensed with the players that they were angry in a healthy way, and I said it in the media leading out. I thought we're going to take this out on somebody. We're going to give someone a good hiding. And I remember when the Red Bulls team turned up, their first team didn't have a fixture, and they dropped 7 of their first team down into the team to play us. And that was my team talk done. Then that was perfect. I literally went in, put the team on the wall, and I just said to the boys, that's what they think of you. That's the respect they're giving you. Don't disappoint the crowd. First 10 minutes, they absolutely battered us. we couldn't get the ball back, couldn't get the football back. And then the game just turned. The game turned. We got 1, we got 2. I think we were 3-0 up at half time. And my message again at half time was clear. I just said, lads, you've got your foot on their throats now. You've got to finish them off. If we get 4, we'll get 5, we'll get 6. And it was a brilliant occasion. We had a full house. Fans loved it. Players loved it. Players loved it because they won, and they also got 2 days off after the game as well. Give them 2 days off. But it was I look back at it. I would look back at it with great pride because it was something that we built towards.
As you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, is that you're currently back in the UK now with Queen's Park Rangers under the stewardship of Michael Beale. How did that opportunity come about, and how are you finding the championship?
Well, my time at Hertford was cut short. Unfortunately, my wife wasn't very well, and she wasn't out in the States with me, so I had to come home. And I come home, and she's good now. She's good as gold now. But I had to come home and just make sure that she was well within herself, and that was important for me. And then the opportunity come up once I sort of got everything settled. I have to say the manager is very, very special. He's an outstanding coach and man, and I think the players think the same. I think the staff think the same. And yeah, got the opportunity to go in there as first team coach with a big emphasis on working with the defenders and working on the restarts, which I've really enjoyed. It's a different role for me, but working in the championship is it's a brilliant privilege. And someone said to me, someone asked me the other day, they said, like, are you surprised that you are where you are? And this has to come across in the right way. But again, the answer is you're not surprised, but you're proud. You're not surprised because of the amount of work I've had to put in over the years, the risks I've taken going over to America for 2 years without my partner, without any staff, the risks that I took leaving a Chelsea for a Millwall, then leaving a Millwall for a West Ham. So you're just really proud, but it's not finished yet for me. I want to keep going and keep working and progressing and developing.
You've just answered a question that came to me there. Is 18-year-old Harry Watling achieving the B licence? Would he be looking at you now surprised, or would he be looking at you extremely proud of everything that you've done?
Yeah, again, listen, you don't know where it's going to take you, do you? You just, I think if you've got a desire to compete, if you've got a willingness to learn, if you've got a focus, if you've got an intensity, and if you've got that work ethic, I think those are the ingredients for you to get to whatever levels you aspire to get to in whatever industry you're in. I certainly don't want to come across like I'm preaching. I'm just trying to get across what values I have in terms of things that are really important to me when I get out of bed every morning.
And I'm asking this on a personal note to hopefully share this with the learners, is that there's been a lot of sacrifice sort of my end into where you want to be, and you get all your badges and you think, where's this application going to go? And you don't get successful and you think, where's it going to go? But also, I think you touched on it earlier, it's not the be all and end all. It just is at this time, it isn't the right time. And as long as you believe in your abilities, your desire to learn, and your relentless work rate, then surely there's only one way forward. Yeah,
absolutely. You back yourself because you truly believe in those values that I just spoke about. So if you get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and you know everyone else is getting up at 7 a.m. in the morning, you've got 2 hours on them every day. If those 2 hours are productive, you're looking at a 14-hour advantage every week over your competitors, if you like. So it's your confidence comes from your work. That's really important. Your confidence comes from knowing that you're doing the most you possibly can. And again, it's not always looking left and right comparing to what other people are doing. It's just knowing that you're doing, you're working at your capacity and your limit, and that should be enough for people.
That really hits home with me, and again, thank you for sharing that with us, Harry, because that's real gold dust for me. With the World Cup just a few days away, the fixture congestion must have been one of the many challenges you've faced. What would your average week look like for you in QPR, and what is the fast-paced league of the Championship?
Yeah, I think the games, it's well documented that the league's relentless in terms of the games. But obviously, they've front-loaded it this year to make room for the tournament that's going on. So, if we're lucky enough to have a one-game week, and the manager likes to build it and have that little break on a Wednesday. So we have the day off on a Wednesday to recover. We'll do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, and Thursday, Friday, and then the game. Everything's about us. Everything is about around sort of how we can, again, go and attack the other team's goal as many times as possible. How to manage the second game. So the second game is the game that's going on behind the ball when you're attacking, to kill transition and stop counter attacks. And then the manager calls it owning the pitch, but how to work out a possession with good cohesion within the team to get the other team off the ball and to win it back and go again. And we work relentlessly on that every single day. It's always about us. I don't think there's any point over-egging it with the opposition and building them up to be something that they're not. I think every team in the Championship has proven that they can beat one another over the course of every season that you've ever watched. So it's about having that belief when you walk out, and I say it a lot just before the players go out. I say to them, be big in the tunnel, push your chest out in the tunnel, be big in the tunnel, because the work we've done throughout the week should surpass them. And that's the confidence you have to have going into the game. I don't think you can go into a game with fear. You're going in, I always look at it in terms of a Saturday. You put the players, they put the kit on, they're dressing up to go and show what they've worked on all week. And it should be a show. It should be a team that's exciting to watch for the punters that are paying their money.
Probably a bit of a personal one here is, how do you deal with the highs and lows of football?
Great question. Initially, especially when I was in America, not very well, to be honest. But again, I have to say, I've been really, really fortunate. I've had a lot of good mentors that have given me good advice, and everyone is very consistent in saying, don't get too high, don't get too low. Just try and keep yourself level. And it's difficult. It's difficult. A real big high for me this season. Obviously, I'm a Millwall fan. I worked at Millwall. We went there earlier on this season and were fantastic. We won the game. We scored 2 really good goals, 1 really good team goal, 1 really good set piece. We kept a clean sheet. It's a notoriously hard place to go, but it was about making sure that we wasn't going over the top with ourselves, because we knew that the next game is going to be a hard game. And again, when you go and you play, and you play a team like Luton and you get beat, it's about not feeling sorry for yourself and beating yourself up. The manager's got a brilliant saying, just says, don't start 1-0 down the next game. So park it, it's done, move on to the next one. So I like that saying, and it's something that really, I think, resonates well with your question.
We are just a few days away from the first game of the World Cup. In previous tournaments, we've probably seen marginal games from just going in around the triangle, as we call it, in the box, and from set pieces. Do you predict any particular tactical trends within this World Cup at all?
I suppose the thing that you're noticing a lot more in the top end of football is teams are coming away from having references on the pitch. What I mean by that is having a winger that just stays wide, having a number 9 that just stands on the 2 centre halves and just plays the small-sided game against them. Having a centre half that plays on one line that doesn't step into the pitch. I think we've come away from that. I think the game now is more about the principles of the game rather than getting too bogged down with tactics of a 4-3-3, if you like. I think everyone stands there when you're kicking off, but other than that, you don't really see that. I think when you think about your number 9s as a reference, you can kind of doubt that a little bit now. Haaland doesn't just stay in one position. Harry Kane doesn't just stay in one position. Harry Kane starts to drop into midfield now, so he starts to encroach on the midfielder's small-sided game rather than just being him against the centre half. I think we'll see that. I think we'll see a lot of that. I think there's some wonderful players going to the tournament. I think we should all be excited. But that's probably the trend I would guess that you'll see. I think the traditional things that you touched on, I think set pieces will be massive, especially where teams have not had a long time to be together. So some of the games might be really tight and it might boil down to someone switching off in the box and someone working a routine, or again, set pieces sometimes just boil down to desire, having a little bit more desire than the other guy to go and edit in the goal. But I'm interested to see, I suppose, similar to you, what the next trend's going to be.
Who do you have as your favourites then, and who do you feel that will be your dark horses?
I think France will win it, and I know that's not the right answer because I think we're due to play them if if everything goes how we want it to go. I think we play them in the quarterfinals. I think France will win it. If France don't win it, I think Argentina will. Them are 2. I just think Argentina have bubbled up nicely recently, and I think obviously they've got Messi in their team, and I think the poetic justice of him winning a World Cup would be magnificent for his legacy. And the dark horses, I like the Denmark coach. I think he's a really interesting guy. I read a lot about him. Read a lot about his methods. So they would probably be my dark horses in that regard.
Before we sort of head on to our quickfire question round to wrap up, I just wanted to touch on a mutual friend of ours who you mentioned earlier, Steve Sellis. I was very fortunate to spend some time with him during my A licence with Scotland. And how much of an impact has he had on your career, and how much emphasis would you place on getting yourself a good mentor?
Yeah, really good. We're really, really close friends. So when I first went to Millwall, that was when I met Steve. Top man. He's got a really, really good way of speaking and an even better way of listening. And I think that sort of that sums him up. He takes real care when you're speaking to understand you. Funny story about Steve. When he was writing his book, he had an editor that was being quite strong with him and telling him to take certain things out. And I remember just saying to him, Steve, he's editing you. He's not editing the book. He's editing you. And I remember he ended up changing the editor and going his own route with that. His book's brilliant. I'd encourage anybody to go and buy Educating Football because it's a great read, and it's a book you can pick up and open it up at any point in the book and not lose where you are. It's because every chapter is a different subject. But Steve's a brilliant man, and in terms of our industry, in the football industry, I think he's your ace in the pack in terms of getting him in for those marginal gains. I think that's what Steve's all about.
I have to agree with you. I was absolutely gripped with the Educating Mindset book, and I think it resonates a lot of probably the experiences you've had. I've had many other coaches that are listening to us, that it just rings true to what we experience in football pretty much every day. And I know Steve is getting himself in some really, really good places through his excellent work. So long may that continue. What advice would you give to any aspiring coaches listening today? Yeah,
I think we touched on it earlier. I think try and fill your week with variety. I think variety is really important. You don't know when the next role is going to come up and what the next role is going to be. So you almost want to prepare yourself for that. I think, again, something Paul Buckle asked me, the text message I've got saved on my phone. And she said, did you know you was going to be a manager? Did you know you was going to be a manager? And I think my response was no, but I knew I'd be ready if it come around. So I think that's the biggest bit of advice I'd give to people is just make sure you're ready. Don't be offered something and you go into the role and you've not done it before and you're sort of winging it. Don't be that person. Be someone that's, you've exposed yourself to as many different experiences as possible. Because I think that's what football's about. And that's what it's about for me. It's not necessarily about the badges that I work for. It's about the experiences that I have. So I know there's not many people at 32 that can say they've managed a game in the USL in front of 15,000 away at Tampa Bay. That's a unique experience. People, I've seen really, really good players at Chelsea come through and play for England or play for Germany or, play. It's about that library of experiences. So I would say just try and expose yourself to as many things as possible. And that lends itself to saying yes a little bit more than you're normally comfortable with. So sometimes you get a call of, can you come and do this session? And could you come and do that? Just say yes a little bit more.
Just before we head in, as I say, to that quick fire round, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Tony Taylor for making this opportunity a reality. I've absolutely loved the last 45, nearly an hour worth of football talk, Harry. So thank you for your time again, and thank you, Tony, for that. The quick fire question round, it's not usually that quick, but just a few questions to just put you on the spot a touch. So best moment in football to date? Probably
would have to be, we played at Hertford, we played away at Tampa Bay against Neil Collins, who was the manager there. I've got a lot of respect for. Really, really good manager. I think he'll come over here and manage. And we beat him 1-0. And we followed a game plan. And we had a lot of players missing. And again, we sort of patched the team together. We had a few away on international duty and injury. And it was, I know the 7-0 was a big one, but I think it's probably the best result in the club's history, going to a club as big as Tampa. And I think we went joint top that day. So that was a big one.
Who's your best friend in football?
Do you know what? I think it'd probably have to be Salas.
Not a bad one to have. Toughest opponent as a coach?
Yeah, like I say, I think Neil Collins at Tampa. I think they were always tough games, and we looked up to Tampa as a club that we wanted to become. Neil's a very experienced guy, played over here for many years, had a great career. He's gone over there and he's having a great career there. So he was one that I really enjoyed when we was preparing for those games. I really enjoyed trying to get the ball back off his teams and then being blunt, giving it to them when we had the ball.
Who's been the best trainer you've worked with?
Oh, that's a great question. Young boy at Millwall, Darko JB, he's now at Leeds, first team player at Leeds. Very good. Ilias Chair at QPR now works his socks off every day. Every day works his socks off. The biggest compliment I can say about Ilias is obviously he knew he was going to the World Cup, and he didn't take his foot off the pedal once. He was absolutely brilliant. So I would say those two, and probably one more, a young boy, Conor McGlynn at Hertford, local lad, top player. But again, every day in training, he gave you everything.
Biggest role model or influence in football?
Obviously, the manager's been very, very, very good for me in terms of sort of elite influences growing up. My first real memory of football was Terry Venables' England team in Euro 96. So I love Terry Venables. But I look at the ones everyone else does, to be honest. I look at Ancelotti, he's one of my favourites. Love Guardiola, love Mourinho. I've got a lot of respect for what Klopp's done. I think with a lot of those managers, you look at them in terms of how many languages they can speak, how they can translate their skill set across every team that they've worked with and still be winners and still be successful.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh, blimey. I think relentless is one that we've used a lot. I'm intense, but I'm intense with my energy. I'm not intense in terms of suppressing people. I'm just intense in terms of my energy. And I'm very, very honest. I think honest is one as well.
Final question. Is there anybody you would recommend or like to hear on the podcast?
Oh, wow. I think that if you haven't already, I think the manager would be a great one. I think obviously Salas is another one. Dave Livermore's a really, really interesting guy, top coach, assistant manager at Gillingham now. He would be another one that I would say try and get hold of Dave, because Dave's a brilliant football brain who's had great success at Millwall and Cardiff and now Gillingham.
Fantastic. Harry, that's the uncomfortable bit done with, hopefully. I want to just reiterate, I've absolutely really, really enjoyed the last hour of your time. Thank you for speaking so honestly with us. I know in the public eye it could probably be a bit hard to open up, so I really appreciate you being honest with us. That is the end of the episode, unfortunately for me and the listeners. And we just want to wish you, the players, staff, and all the best after the international break.
Cheers, Martin. Thanks for having me on, mate.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy the content that we're trying to bring to you. Don't forget, new episodes will be released every Monday. You can find us on the iTunes Store, Spotify, and if you want to see the video, you can see it on our YouTube channel, PCT Football Coaching.